Hey guys, and welcome to week 14. At this point, you've had the opportunity to look at John McWhorter's article. So I want to explore a little further what he means by saying LOL is a pragmatic particle. So if we look back at his piece, he says something very interesting about halfway down. He says LOL is one of several texting expressions that convey nuance in a system where you don't have the voice and face to do it the way you normally would. When we talk about face and voice, we think about our literal voice, maybe our voice box, but we also have a more metaphorical sense to it. Our voice, how we are intending our message to come across, right? Likewise, when we talk about our face, we have our literal face, which we use to engage in eye contact, to frown, to smile, to look interested or disinterested in the conversation. All of these things can help us to identify what is going on in the conversation and whether we should engage in the conversation or not. But we're not talking about just your literal face. We're talking about the way you present yourself to the world as your face. And so when McWhorter is saying that in texting, even though it's fingered speech, even though we technically text the way that we talk, we are without the ability to communicate voice and face because we don't have the advantage of being face to face with our interlocutor, with the person we're speaking with. When you're having a conversation with someone, there are a million little nonverbal cues that you are able to pick up on that help the both of you navigate the conversation. For example, if you think about turn taking in conversation, how do you know when it's your turn to talk? And how do you know when it's not your turn to talk? And generally, the way that you know this is by these varying periods of silence that exist in a conversation. So if someone is talking and they take a little break, like that, we have to realize, is that person taking a break and going to continue talking? Or is that person taking a break and now it's my turn to talk? Who has the floor at this moment? Um, and so we have all these different kind of built-in mechanisms for us to be able to negotiate a conversation with someone. And in addition to just how long of a period, um, in addition to like a period of silence, that's usually a cue that someone can talk and take the floor, right? There's a silence or a lull in the conversation. We also have vocal inflection, such as pitch and intonation, that give us this clue that someone is done talking. So if someone says, I'm going to the store and then I'm going to the bank, we know by the way they said bank, we know by this intonation that the person is not done talking. They're likely going to say something else. I'm going to the store, and then I'm going to the bank, and then I'm going to the theater. And we know bank, the way they say bank, um, well, because it falls there at the end. When we say I'm going to the bank and then I'm going to the theater, we know the way that the pitch falls on theater, that this is the end of what this person is going to say. I'm going to the store and I'm going to the bank. And I let my intonation fall on the word bank, then you know, oh, she's completed her thought. And if I take a long enough pause, then you know that it could also be your turn to talk. So we have all these different things that enable us to have these face-to-face conversations, and for them to be successful conversations because we can read each other, we know how to take turns. When we go into the texting realm, though, we all of a sudden don't have the benefit of that. And it can be awkward because you don't know, is this conversation over? Is it my turn to talk? Can I change the subjects? Are you mad at me? Are you happy? Were you being sarcastic when you said this? How am I supposed to take the words that are here in my text and interpret them when I don't have the benefit of the person's voice and face in the conversation? And so McWhorter is saying that LOL buys us this in conversation and texting conversation. It provides us that opportunity to clarify some of the miscommunication that could be taking place in terms of whose turn it is to talk and what the tone or what the intent or meaning of the utterance is that was just sent to you in a text. So I wanted to show you this article, and this is available for you on Canvas right above where you found this lecture. So I would encourage you to open it up simultaneously because I think when I screenshot it into this lecture, it's a little blurry. So you can probably read it better by opening that document as well. But this is a worksheet called Pragmatic Particles. And in this worksheet, it talks about how pragmatic particles work, how they function in conversation. You might not quite understand the term pragmatic or particles, or then the phrase put together, pragmatic particles, but I guarantee you're going to understand the information that this worksheet gives you because you are individuals who participate in spoken and written conversation all the time. So you're going to easily be able to relate this to your own use of language. And we have pragmatic particles in typical speech as well as in texting. So this is not a new concept. Pragmatic particles have been around as long as people conversing has been around. I think an interesting thing it says here, pragmatic particles do not always have a specific meaning that you will find in your dictionary. So you cannot necessarily look up in the dictionary and say, okay, I'm going to look up and okay, means yada yada yada, but yet has a function in speech. It does mean something. It's used for something. It's a filler to help us think. It gives us a default place to go in our mouth as we're trying to let our brain catch up with our speech. So these pragmatic particles like has some kind of function, and below in this document it gives you some of the different functions. Pragmatic particles are not always non-fluencies like random noises. They're actual word units too. So the first function is that a pragmatic particle can help organize what you say. It can help to start a conversation. So in this example, we have right is used as a pragmatic particle. Person A says, right, let's get started. We need to get the suitcases into the car. In this example, the use of right doesn't have a lot of meaning to it, but it can be used and is being used here as a way to maybe initiate a conversation or to start a turn in an already ongoing conversation. So LOL can sometimes be used this way to start a conversation. Another common way that you see LOL used is in the function of ending a conversation. Pragmatic particles end conversations as well. So if you just sent someone a text and they don't reply back to you, you don't know, are they angry? Are they being rude? Am I being ignored? Why haven't they replied? So you're the person that received this person's text, and if you want to discontinue the conversation so the conversation is over, and yet if you just don't reply, the person's going to think, did you not receive the text? Did you not like the text? And so you need some way to communicate that you received the text and the conversation is finished. And so a lot of times you'll see someone send back an isolated use of LOL to signify, got your message and this conversation's now over, right? Alternatively, people can send LOL and then immediately follow the use of LOL with additional information or an additional comment. And that's a completely different use of LOL. It's not being used to end a conversation. But, excuse me, when you get an isolated use of LOL, after a series of back and forth exchanges, you get an isolated use of LOL. That use of LOL means we're finished talking, the conversation is now wrapped up. Now we have markers like LOL in spoken conversation too. Same with text messages and spoken conversation. You can't just end a conversation and walk away. We have to kind of work our way out of it, the same way we use LOL to wrap up the conversation. So think about when you're on the phone and you want to get off the phone. You say things like, okay, well, it was great to hear from you, or well, I've got some stuff I need to go get done. And you kind of do a little linguistic dance to let the person know that you are wrapping up the conversation. It's the exact same thing with LOL. You're sending it to say, hey, I don't want to be rude and not reply to you, so I'm ending the conversation and I'm ending it by sending you LOL to acknowledge your message was received, but there's no need to continue another dialogue. LOL can also be used to change topics or manage topics. So sometimes if you're trying to change the direction of the conversation, you can insert an LOL as a way to kind of segue another direction. Sometimes you see pragmatic particles here ordering what you say, like words such as and, next, first, lastly, but, then. I'm not entirely sure I've seen LOL used this way, but if you come across an instance of this in your text messages, definitely let me know in your essay. Sometimes we see pragmatic particles being used as responses. We call these response tokens. This is also called back channeling. I know it more so as back channeling. So I've said something and you're acknowledging that I've said something by uttering something like, yeah, right, okay, uh-huh, totally, I know, I see. The list goes on and on. These simply function to show the person that you're listening to them. You're engaged in what they're saying. They are used for pure sociability, and really they do not share any meaning or have any contextual purpose except to communicate I'm listening. And so whether we want to call these response tokens or back channels, whatever we call it, it doesn't matter. Its function, just know that its function is not to signify it. Well, first of all, its function is not to communicate information, like valuable information. It's simply to signify that you're engaged, you're actively listening. It's not to signify that you want a turn in the conversation. It's also not to signify that you want the conversation to end. It's to simply tell the person, hey, I'm listening, you can keep the floor, you can keep talking. On this next page, it says we can that these serve three functions. And the first is that it shows interest in the speaker. Really, I would argue personally that all of these are purely for the point of showing interest. Every single one of them is to show interest, to show you're listening. But you know, you can show interest and then also relay surprise in what you just heard from the speaker. You can show interest and also relay sympathy in what you just heard. So I would say the underlying function for sure is that you're communicating, that you're listening, and you're letting the speaker continue to talk, and that we might also communicate some other things with it, like surprise, sympathy or empathy, shock, disappointment. We can convey emotions with these, but the function is really just to show that you're listening. And we do this with LOL. LOL can definitely communicate surprise and sympathy and other emotions, like you receive a text that says, I ran into my ex-boyfriend today. You respond with, LOL, no way. Or, I have this really long paper to write. LOL, me too. Next section, pragmatic particles can show attitude. Like in spoken language, we use literally, I think, thankfully, to be honest, to tell you the truth, in fact, and this list goes on and on. It's just to mark your attitude or your point of view. It marks how strongly you are committed to the thing you are about to say. Seriously, you need to do your homework. Verse, you need to do your homework. It indicates a force. Using seriously is like a force. It indicates I'm committed to this next statement. This can be used with LOL sometimes. But one of the common ways we use pragmatic particles is to sound less direct. We say things that sometimes perhaps sound too direct or too rude, so we want to soften that or mitigate that. We have some words built into the English language that allow us to do that. We call these softeners or hedges. Words like sort of, kind of, maybe, probably, just, like. You'll notice that I think is on this list as well. And I think was also on the on the list right above. We talked about attitude. And this is the difference of I think you need to leave and I think you need to leave. We use these as a way to just soften when we use I think or other features, like just like, probably, maybe. We use these to soften the blow of whatever it is we're trying to communicate. And we see LOL being used this way. If you say, I hate her, and that's all you say in your text message, and there's no emoji or emoticon or anything with that text, it's really hard to figure out, do you really hate her? That seems pretty rude and it seems pretty forceful. So what you say sometimes, what you see sometimes is LOL being used to mitigate a really direct phrase, like such as I hate her, LOL. And that LOL is there to kind of soften the message. You may actually dislike the person, like there may be some truth in that, but the LOL is just a way to kind of make it a little bit less forceful. Now, if you say to someone, I hate you, LOL, it could be that you're softening it, like maybe you genuinely hate that person, but in all likelihood, you are just being sarcastic. Like you don't actually hate them at all. And that's a little bit different. When you're using it as a softener or a hedge, you mean what you say, you're just trying to sound less direct about it. When you say, I hate you, LOL, you're back up in part C, where it talks about using this device to show attitude, and you're just trying to convey that you're being sarcastic, that you don't really mean what you're saying. So there's a little bit of a difference between these two. Sounding less direct, generally, you mean what you're saying to come. When you try to sound less direct, it means you mean what you're saying to an extent. You're just trying to soften what it is that you're saying. Here, these next sections, E and F, we don't see LOL being used in these ways, but you can review this information if you'd like. What I want you to do is consider how you use LOL. And what I'd like you to do is to actually go to your phone and to find the last time you used LOL. That could have been 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago. In any case, I want you to look at the way you used it and look at the conversation you used it in, so the context, and figure out, were you using it in its more traditional way to laugh? Were you laughing out loud? Did you really use LOL because you thought the content was funny and you found the content humorous? Or were you using this as a pragmatic particle? And if you were using it as a pragmatic particle, were you doing it to sound less direct? Were you doing it to show attitude, to convey, hey, I was joking? Or were you using it to show interest, like a back channel? Or were you doing it to close the conversation? We just covered so many ways that you could be using it as a pragmatic particle. So how are you using it this way, if you are at all? I want to point out to those of you that use emojis, earlier in the semester, we looked at Facebook research that was talking about who uses emojis versus LOL, ha ha ha, he he he, and all those different things. And especially among young females, the emoji was way more common than LOL. So if you happen to be an emoji user, you might think about, is it possible that you're using emojis for some of these same reasons, for some of these same functions in speech? Are you using it as a pragmatic particle? Maybe. It's something to think about. You don't need to write about that in your essay. It's just more of a thought question. In your essay, though, you're going to address LOL specifically and look at your own use of it, whether it's in the more traditional way for laughter or the more contemporary way called pragmatic particles. All right, I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and let me know if you have any questions, guys. Thank you.